Good morning, everyone. I'm just going to do a session on a good app I found. Some of you might already use it, which helps with CPD. Then I'll go through a webinar that I went to, led by Hattie, which was really informative. So I'll share what was said there. And then just a little section on how useful podcasts can be. The app, to begin with, is Teacher Tapp. I don't know how many of you already use this, but I found it really, really useful. So you download it. Every day you can answer 3 questions for a huge survey that they do. And they're normally quite current to what's going on in the news. So a lot of it's been about COVID-19, obviously. And then now it's sort of moving on to schools reopening and how people are doing that. So it gives you an insight of what the main questions are about it all. But then the best thing about it is it then gives you a daily tip. So they're normally about a 4 to 5 minute read, but it takes you to either a blog or an interesting article. The one yesterday was from a head teacher that's just opened his school. So he was talking about how he's gone about that, so the approach he's used. One that I found really interesting was sort of how to approach with students that have not done, very much over lockdown, so they haven't engaged with the distance learning. So in this article, they use this 3 approach plan. So notice, reflect, plan. But what I did like about the article is they shared resources. So what this teacher did, I think they were a maths teacher, is they had a Word document, and in it was a table you can see where tasks that the students should have done online, and then they had to self-assess, but then also what to do looking forward. So giving students a bit of student voice, like what they'd like us to do, but it's already formatted, and I've got that in a Word document which I can share with everyone. But the next thing was the webinar from Hattie, and again this was along the same lines. The webinar was called Build Back Better. Now if you haven't heard about Hattie, he mainly a statistician, so he looks at the impact of our teaching practices and he assigns them a number, so it's called an effect size. So it's on a scale of 0 to 1. So those that have minimal impact are like lower number, like 0.3 and lower. Then those with a moderate impact are like your 4, 0.4, 0.6, and then things that are quite effective are above 0.7. And interestingly, and probably no surprise, is the quality of the teacher has the biggest impact. But he looks at things like, the length of time for the summer holidays, because we know there's a little bit of regression, after the summer, but different countries have different lengths. And it doesn't really seem to have an impact on, student outcomes. He's got an insight into what practices are the best. He's really trying to look for a paradigm shift in education with Build Back Better, because he thinks this is a great opportunity for us to, make great changes. Sort of looked at the grammar schooling. What he meant here was like the structure of our schooling. So it's been the same for centuries. We talk a lot, we ask questions about facts. We see the student as a recipient of learning. We age group them, we track, we segregate, and we emphasise facts. So that was like the current situation, and he's looking for, some changes now when we return. One of the things he got people to think about on the webinar was, well, what do you recall, about your favourite teacher, your best teacher at school? And lots of answers are, the same. They turned you on to their passion for the subject. They saw something that you maybe didn't see in yourself. So it's more like the personality, the personal skills that a teacher has. Obviously, they're here to learn. So he talked about the Goldilocks principle of our lessons. That's to do with challenge. The lesson has to be not too easy, because we don't go to school to go over things we already know. But then again, we can't have it too hard, because that will switch students off. So it has to be just right, like Goldilocks' porridge. There is a level of struggle, but we're learning, it's not too difficult. But another thing is, it's got to be the right level, but it's also not to be boring. It's got to be engaging. So we talked about when we go back to classrooms. We've got to really be engaging the students. Our activities have got to be engaging. Okay, so what have we learned so far from lockdown, terrible crisis? We've been put into like a natural experiment for education. So no surprises again. So this was like an international study. So you've got parent positive aspects, student positive aspects, these are the top 10, and then the teacher positive aspects. Lots of positives can be drawn out of this, but obviously the flip side is the negatives and what he called the ouchies. Students maybe have had too much screen time, teachers maybe have had too much screen time. I know myself, like I've never suffered with problems with my eyes, but I think being in front of the computer all the time, it's my eyes feel drained at the end of the day. Less connection with friends, it's all of us, distractions at home, additional workload for teachers, managing stress and work well-being, and then reduced direct supervision for students that need it. So lots of ouchies there as well as positives. Obviously, we've already looked at this and we're going to be looking at it, the effect of the trauma, and the recovery curriculum. The effects are going to be different for everyone. Also, the time they manifest them are going to be different. So we've got to be sensitive to that. So there's lots of reflection processes. It's already been happening at, our college. Things we've got to consider there, he talked about. Lots of groups that we're already aware of, disadvantaged groups. And then there might be, students that we have gone underneath the radar, and we'll have to, deal with those students that maybe haven't engaged or have had problems engaging. Got to be mindful of that. He then took us to an article written by Michael Fullen. So he's a Canadian educational researcher, and it's talking again about the model for returning. 5-stage approach. So invite, defront, collaborate, choice and support. So what he meant by them are, get students to think about the positive insights emerging from the pandemic. What did they learn? What did they learn about themselves? What are they grateful for? So inviting them to share their ideas. Also, he talked about inviting them back into the classroom. Then talked about defronting the classroom, because a lot of students, working at home, they haven't had to sit and listen to an adult for long periods of time. So going back to just being in front of the classroom as a teacher, he reckons isn't going to be the right approach. Would be more activities for collaboration. Those students that have been good at accessing online stuff, again, we can continue using that, and then they watch sort of like the teacher exposition at home, and then when they come into the classroom, it's more about doing questions. So we're not standing in front teaching them, we're more going around facilitating learning and supporting them. So giving them a chance to move around the classroom, he reckons, is important. Allowing choice again, because they've had freedom at home. And then also allowing them to express concerns and making suggestions about how they learn. So that's going back again to that document I shared, where giving them a little bit of choice, let them inform us. People are very worried about the amount of time, students have been away from the classroom. But again, John Hattie was not concerned about this, because he was involved at the time when New Zealand had the earthquakes, and he was saying like that in that disaster, schools were demolished, homes were demolished. So he was saying when you looked at the data from those students, when they did exams, so a lot did better in the exams because they'd learnt these independent skills, and overall there wasn't a big impact. As you were saying, teachers are really good at triaging, like a hospital triage, you are able to determine who's in the most need, and then supporting people. So he said he's seen it with the earthquakes in New Zealand, floods around the world, teacher strikes, where in the 1980s, where there was lots of striking, especially in Britain, the impact wasn't great. So then he also was talking about this revolution in using technology, but we've got to get the balance right. Something that dawned on me is he was saying a good effect size is where teachers share success criteria. And he said, do these online platforms allow that? And I was thinking, I've been sending lots and lots of questions or activities, but I haven't always shown students what a good one looks like. I haven't always shared the success criteria. So that made me think about my practice. So we have to make sure we're still doing that online. So effect sizes, high one are teachers and us evaluating ourselves, having high expectations, 0.9, so really high effect. Sharing success criteria, very high there. Using the Goldilocks principles that I talked about with challenge, not too easy, not too hard, but also very engaging. So he, again, going back to the new model, so going back to when he talked about the grammar of schooling, he's going, well, this is a great opportunity to make us really think and maybe change a lot of our approaches, new ways of looking at things, certainly getting parents more involved. If we're ever in this situation again, maybe we need to be thinking about equipping parents better. So podcasts, these I found are an excellent source of CPD. Again, they're available as and when you want. Maybe takes less effort than reading. And there's loads and loads of educational podcasts out there for teachers. Basically, you just need to download podcast player, and then you search through, listen to them on your mobile device, download them whenever, listen to them whenever. Again, Iris Connect that Freddie was talking about a couple of weeks ago for CPD has some excellent podcasts as well. If you're interested in what I've talked about with John Hattie on that, the Iris Connect, one of the first ones in the list that they share there is from John Hattie. Listen to the man himself. Then also Best Practice Network has some really good educational podcasts on various topics. And then another one I found was The Cult of Pedagogy. A lot of them are talking about current issues as well as general pedagogy. Then podcasts for our students. Kev Lycett shared with staff something that we've been using in science for quite a long time is Seneca. But Seneca offer free podcasts for students too, covering a whole host of GCSEs and A-levels. Then you can find podcasts for novels. I found like When an Inspector Calls, there's quite a lot there. Listen to the podcasts as well as reading them, and that's useful, especially with students with specific learning needs, whether they have problems decoding, maybe any visual impairments, so they can listen to the texts. They reckon that students will listen for longer than they'll watch or read, because you can do it by much easier multitasking. So when they're travelling, when they're at the gym. My main subject, well, A-level is biology, and there's loads of really good A-level podcasts for students, and they're not just done by adults, they're done by the students themselves. So there's good peer-peer interaction there. So Seneca has got all subjects, so just exemplified it. It's got geography there, the science, all three sciences at GCSE and then at A-level, and then episodes from any novels that they have to study in English. Then moving this forward, you can get the students to make podcasts, maybe not to share generally, but with each other. Teachers could produce them, with their lesson content. Maybe not as daunting as making a video, just making a little podcast, and then that helps with absenteeism, or again helping students engage from home, because we should embrace now, some students have worked well at home, so we need to continue that. Hopefully you found some of that interesting, useful.